Hi, welcome to Kintsugi Conversations, which is a podcast series looking at social change activism in the world of sexual violence and abuse. I'm Rob Balfour.
And I'm Neve Rose.
And this is Kintsugi Conversations. We have some wonderful guests from the United States with us today. So we've got Simon and Kathy, who made an amazing film many years ago. They was talking about it back starting in the 90s, called Boys and Men Healing, which is about male survivors sexual violence. And I'll hand over to you guys to tell us a little bit about the history of the film and how it developed into an international vehicle for many services to use.
Well, I wanted to say thank you. We love the long history with you and love that you continue this conversation this way and just so many stories. So thank you. Thanks for having us.
I think it's good for you to be here. And we're interested in your story of activism because film documentaries is activism, isn't it? It's kind of changing the world through visual messaging and bringing lived experience into people's lives in a very powerful medium, which is why film is such a massive international industry. So we're interested to hear how you saw the film, its history, your experiences of it, and then we'll have a conversation about where it's going and where we could go with film and story making.
I guess I'll start with where it started was
The Healing Years.
Yeah, The Healing Years was my first independent film. My background is working for the television networks on, for Discovery Channel back in New York for the networks on different shows. And I moved to California from the East and realized that I wanted to learn about making independent films just so I had more freedom, creative freedom. So I made my first documentary called The Healing Years that was under an umbrella of a colleague of mine who did a wonderful film, probably one of the first back in the 80s on child sexual abuse that was on PBS. It was called Breaking Silence. Her name is Teresa Tellini, and she had started a nonprofit and was able to raise money under that for her first film and taught me the process of independent filmmaking so we could own and do what we want and distribute it. And it's not going to go on a shelf. We want it to be more activists, and it's not an easy process. I'm not, saying don't go out there and do it without thinking it through. So anyway, I did learn, and she helped me to realize that a film that was needed at the time, because she was doing it on child abuse, children. She felt like adult survivors were not given a voice, and that she felt like healing was the need. So I thank Teresa for her vision. She was definitely a visionary, and I took the baton from her and made this film about women healing from child sexual abuse. And it was actually, when I look back, it was sort of like the first Me Too film way back when, I forget when we finished.
We started the first screening was the year 2000 when PBS picked it up for 5 years, every night in this country and every city in this country.
Wow.
Yeah, and I actually had my son the month that I finished The Healing Years. So I had these big things happening. So Maya Angelou endorsed that, and it was featuring powerful women like former Miss America Marilyn Vandermeer before she was really coming out talking about it. Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco is a very famous Methodist progressive church, and Janice in our film was the president of that, and her pastor husband was kind of a well-known pastor of Glide, and she told her story. It was really powerful. And then the inner city women that they started healing circles for sexual abuse survivors. They're homeless women and, really intense stuff. So we filmed that, and it was really just touching. Because you're going, it's not just the white Miss America, it's not black, it's sexual abuse happens across the board. And then the Miss America, of course, who was abused by her father. And then another woman who was an elder woman, but she found out later that all her children were abused by her father, too. So it just really struck a nerve, but it was also empowering because women were speaking out.
Sure.
And it was like about healing, and we're not going to let this happen. So it was really the first voices, I think, in a media situation of women saying, we're not victims, we're going to speak out, we're going to use our voice. So from that place, I'll let Simon take over after that. He was bugging me because he's a marketing guy and he's just brilliant. He's got his pulse on everything. And he's like, everybody wants one on boys.
No, the story happened.
Okay, let him tell you. That's what I remember.
The story happened when Ray Price, not everybody, but the Ray Crisis Centers directly, I was selling the film to, and they were using it in women's groups. The direct quote was, "What about the boys?" And in back of my head, I grew up in San Francisco for 45 years, very progressive, very liberal, pretty much close to anarchist, and I was thinking, what do you mean boys? It just didn't click. I thought women were the victims in society. And I had no idea. And I'm talking to thousands of people. I had no idea. And so I kept bugging Kathy, we got to get this film called Boys and Men Healing. We got to start it. So Kathy kept saying no because we were taking in hundreds of phone calls from survivors of women. So we were like a 2-person team and pretty much stretched to the hill. And she said, no way. And I said, we have to, it's going to go to the moon.
And then for me, I was with mom and our son was going to a church and there was a little boy there that was acting out with kids. And we had heard about it through, I forget, it was the mother, I guess it was the mother of the boy told us. And then she said that she told me that the boy was, the girl there was a girl acting out with him that was abused by her grandfather. So then he started acting out as a child, and I was like, you need to get him help, because he started acting out, and then it turned out that the mother of the boy was also abused. So you know how it is when she's not aware, they're not aware because she didn't do her own healing. So I got the whole family in therapy, having done our film already on healing. And the boy got into counseling and everything. Anyway, that made me realize, oh my gosh, boys in whatever way were abused too, and the cycle goes on. And I realized as a mother of a boy that I started becoming aware and what Simon was saying. So I realized as a mother and as a filmmaker, I had to do this. It was like, I have to. So we did. We raised the money, and it took a while. We brought on David Lisak was really, really a big help. And I realized in researching the cycle of violence with boys, that nobody was talking about, the men in prison and anger and rage and violence and domestic violence, all this, these societal issues. And we can go on more than that, addictions, all of the traumas. I realized I wanted that in the film because it was such a not talked about issue for males. And I also wanted men to have a voice. And I was studying the hero's journey, the storyline of the hero's journey is a famous storyline for films and books and so on. What's his name? Joseph Campbell's kind of wrote a whole book on it. He did a PBS series. I was really studying that and realizing with the men I was talking to, and David and Tony, we interviewed tons of men, so it was helping me shape it. And I realized that that these men were on a hero's journey, that the healing process, just like the broken vase, with gold, it was a journey to reclaiming the self. And there was such a so many stereotypes with men, not being able to have a voice, masculinity issues, not having their feelings, but what we learned, along the way, and one of Antonio in the film said it, that men want to speak about this. They just need space to tell their stories. And I was like, yeah. And I realized they were just wanting to talk about it and get it off, their hearts and minds, and just the horrible secrets that they live with. And like Mark in the film, Mark Crawford, he said, when I told my story, that was the beginning of healing. When I actually voiced this happened to me out loud, whether it's a person or a beloved or, publicly. So that started shaping. And then David, circling back to David, I found out David was abused. And I was like, David, I want you in the film. Will you do that? It was really a big thing for him because he was a leading trauma psychologist.
Absolutely.
And he did. Yeah, he was ready and he did it. And then I realized that I really need, the crime aspect. And he was working with JT in prison, James Thomas, who was on death row. And he said his story is powerful and interesting. And so we worked together to get that interview. And that's a whole story we could tell, because he was ready to be executed within days of when we finally got permission to maybe go in, but we had to deal with the governor of North Carolina, and the warden was helping us. And then there was they got a stay for the injection issue, was pain or whatever. So there's a whole story around this, but I'll tell you a little more later. But he did get a stay, and we were able literally to go in the next day. And so we filmed David interviewing JT. And then we brought the crime in. Then Tony was mentioning the whole thing about his rage. Tony is a teacher. As a young man, got him so much trouble. He was ready to kill somebody on the street that was hassling his sister. I mean, he said, I was ready to get a gun. So the rage that some men had because they hadn't done the healing became like a sub-story that nobody was talking about on this issue. So the stories were kind of uncut, like you're saying, there's layers. We were uncovering these layers and building relationships with these men. The trust, and they became friends. They're still friends, and amazing journey. It's not just filmmakers, your lives intertwine when you make a film like this.
And that's the kind of filmmakers we are. We have a very strong relationship with everybody we've ever filmed. I wanted to add something about the film, the group, and a layer. We're filming this group, the group that you saw in the film.
Sure.
And there was a Latino man sitting down.
Yeah.
And he said men need to have their voices. He wore a 49er shirt, I think.
Yeah.
Well, he looked at me and he said, do I know you? I said, no, I'm just Weinberg. I don't know you. He said, Weinberg? You mean Matthew Weinberg? No. He said, I sat down with Matthew Weinberg, my brother, in high school for 4 years. And I remember this Latino man being joyful and loving and giving all through high school, not knowing he's a survivor. And so not only that we're all intertied and so close, he held all that stuff in, and he was just the joyful, loving person in high school. I had to tell you that layer.
I think there's a lot of themes that have just emerged. Your film, I think, was one of my, because I've seen your film so many times, I've lost count how many times I've watched it. You can tell from what you just said that the guys, it's almost like you're not there. So there's no tension in the room because you must have built up a really deep sense of trust with them. because they're not conscious. They're talking as if you're not there, which must be a very difficult thing to achieve with a group of survivors who are distrustful of everybody, basically, who's entering the space. It comes across. I think that's part of the power of the film for me, is that you're there, but they are relaxed and trusting. So they're talking about things in a way they maybe wouldn't have talked to a TV news crew about. They would have been, especially in the groups, it was almost as if there wasn't anyone there. It was just them. That comes across really, really well. And talking about the hero's journey, a kind of model for making films, and it's the whole story of mankind is the hero's journey, isn't it? When you actually look at every myth and story is about that. And we've just developed a program to work with male survivors in universities. And I'm aware, because I did narrative inquiry for my degrees and things. So I like stories in psychology and stuff. And we've called it the hero's journey. And it's a modular program of recovery for students in university that we're just experimenting with. And then we called it the hero's journey because I think, like the metaphor for the broken vase as repaired for gold, it's telling guys that actually your journey is the journey of a hero. So I know a lot of special forces guys are survivors of childhood sexual abuse, for instance. And one of the famous ones here just did a podcast where he was talking about his own childhood sexual abuse. And I know there's American guys. So heroes are everywhere. And they're often like the Latino guy in school, who's the joyful guy who doesn't look like anything's affecting him, is kind of the one who's trying to deal with massive issues. And if you look at TJ, what people don't realize when he's in the prison scene with David is literally he is days away from being executed. And yeah, he's calm and serene almost, isn't he? I'm not sure many human beings with that. I'm sure there's a lot of disassociation going on at that time. But clearly he's facing his end. Yeah, he's showing compassion and a connectedness with David, which comes across through that thick, bulletproof glass, where he can't even touch the other human being who's trying to connect with him very, very powerfully. So all of those kind of bits, I think, are really powerful that you really captured in the film. Have you got a question, Niamh? Because I'm always asking questions.
Not necessarily a question, but I do think that that's where the film is so powerful, because you kind of see these men finding their voices and they're able to have these conversations with each other that they might not have had in the past. And I just think it's such a wonderful, beautiful film. So I just wanted to say that, really.
Thank you. And I would say it's because what I learned from the men, that when men heal, when humans heal, really, but men specifically, because we're talking about men and also it's so hard as a man in this masculinity culture to feel and to talk about their feelings. I found that the men in the film and the men that had done the hard work of healing, the hero's journey, went into the underworld and came out, at least on their way home to themselves, that they were the most kind of emotionally literate and kind and compassionate people that I've met. I really feel like that journey just made them more whole as human beings and more accessible emotionally, and just wonderful, And so I think that the film being lovely is because of their presence and what the hard work they did. I mean, not even hard, just unbelievably challenging work of healing. We don't want to say it's easy, right? They did it. They went into that dark place and came out, with the helpers that you do on that journey. So thank you, and I thank them, all of them, every day. I just think.
And their bravery as well, wasn't it? Because we think of it, talking now in a world where there is a lot more kind of discourse around the issues of, sexual violence, and survivors, celebrity survivors and other survivors are speaking out more, writing books, etc. And whilst that was going on 20 years ago, there was less of it. So for them to, especially for males of colour, There's not many black guys who've appeared in documentaries of the survivors. And we hardly see anybody from a Caribbean or African background in services because they're just reluctant to come forward. So he was a very kind and brave to do it and so articulate and honest about things as well. So that was something I'd never seen before. And in fact, I've not seen really since. So.
That was purposeful, and we lived near San Francisco at the time, so we knew filming in the inner city, just like we did, also in the healing years, we filmed in the inner city of San Francisco. The inner city church, Blythe Memorial, that had these amazing. The ethnic diversity of just amazing church group that we were able to access what we wanted, a really cross section of people, and and each of those had their own, what was his name? The cultural aspects were also part of their healing issues because
maybe the man playing the piano.
I'm forgetting his name. It's been so long. Richard. He passed away a while back. He was such a sweet man. And Richard, his culture that he came from, the Asian culture, was like, so you're not only a man, and he was a gay man. So all of those things just made it even harder. So we wanted to bring in all those elements, and Tony being a black man, calling crisis centers and, getting this thing, well, no, we only have groups for women. And, then having to come across being a black man, people think it's only black men that are criminals, no, it's not. And he wanted to make that clear. He became a teacher, I am successful. He really, his whole cultural story. I think he even went to Africa and really reclaimed his roots. And
he did.
Yeah. So we have to look at those cultural aspects. And the same with Janice, Asian American in our film. She was in a Japanese internment camp as a little girl where she was abused. So that whole, cultural part of her healing was painful, so there's levels. It's not just healing from abuse. It's like, where do you come from? Marilyn Vanderveer, white Miss America. She has everything you would imagine. Her father was abusing her.
And abusing other kids at 78 down the street.
And prominent in his community. Right.
When I say to people, because I speak to people in the so-called system, we call it the system. So what used to be called institutions and the people who are we pay to look after us and take care of us, is that, survivors are more than their experience of abuse. They are really complex human beings in every sense of the word, like you are. They've had all sorts of experiences beyond the abuse itself, and that you can't just see them for the, if you just see them in that limited lens, you're missing who they really are. It's just the experience is dominating often their way of engaging with life. And it's because of that dominance that they're limited, not by themselves often, it's the culture that silences them. So that's where it comes from, breaking the silence. You wouldn't need to break it if it didn't exist. So I've always believed in challenging the silence, because I think actually it puts too much weight onto the individual survivor to have to be the one who is the hero who breaks the silence. And that can be a very uncomfortable place to be in the wrong context. So it's about silence, but the challenge is important in breaking the silence for the culture. And when that happens, it'll be much easier for people to break their silence because they'll be welcomed home, basically. Another metaphor that I think is very powerful is they have to feel safe to come home. And if they can come home metaphorically to a society that's welcoming them, then we're all going to be beneficiaries, especially then, because society's not going to have the massive drug issues that it has. A lot of the domestic violence is created by unregulated emotional kind of contacts. All of these things are actually driven by the effects of abuse on children not just sexually, it's kind of the ace stuff, isn't it? So we have all of that going on, and it's not ace, it's, it's abuse. It's creating this disconnect from everything that creates all sorts of other issues. So that's why film is very important, and why I'm really pleased that you agreed to talk about it. I didn't, after all these years, we're kind of doing, I thought you disappeared and you weren't going to be interested in talking about it. And I thought it's really good to bring you back and to have a kind of reflective moment about it, really, and talk about where those guys are now and what they learned from it, what benefit it was for them, and what the message is, and what you've learned from showing it across the world and it being shown across the world and the feedback. And where does it go next?
Yeah.
Where does film go next in this story?
It was just amazing, the years of outreach and the phone ringing off the hook.
It started off where we were editing in my mom's house.
Okay.
And the editor was with Kathy, and I kept getting phone calls from Eric Holder, like the AJ for Obama, and he wanted it now. And I'm like, no. And it was a lot of stress. I mean, stress for Kathy, like big time.
We were wrestling in the edit room to get everything done. It was stressful. Yeah. Anyway, we got it
into the AJ, and the Justice Department got it, and I didn't know what happened. All I know is that Mark Crawford, the priest that would be his Mark, he was invited to come to the federal building, the FBI building, and they screened the film.
Okay.
And Eric Holder asked Mark to come up on stage with VAWA was there, senators were there, everybody was there, and he hugged Mark and he said, "I am so proud of you." And then he looked at Big Voice Pictures. He said, "That's going to change the world." So that's our beginning. Yeah.
Very, very good.
And we had a senator endorse it. So, part of our outreach was getting it into places like that, getting into Simon, he's the one that knows how to do it. He had a map in our garage, and he had like crisis centers all over the country that he went through all 50 states. He found out that this handles, it's the hub for hundreds of crisis centers throughout each state. So, I mean, the phone was ringing off the hook because he got all of them behind us.
I got everybody to shake hands.
Well, and the thing is, they wanted this. It was a tool that they didn't have, so, and it was just happening so quickly. If looking back, I wish we didn't realize how much work it was going to be. It was really both of us. And thankfully, we had a little bit of help, but, and then the military somehow got to, how did that happen? I don't even remember.
Yeah, I think I put it out to Male Survivor and 1 in 6. And then they started using the film to bases, and Fort Sam Houston, and this base and that base, and the Pentagon even. And then for some reason, the Fort Sam Houston, the whatever head military health, whatever that was about, they wanted the filmmakers. So I come in there, we show the film, and I just kind of like, I didn't do the therapy because that's for David. That's for everybody else doing the therapy. I came in there as a filmmaker trying to get men's voices that could not be heard on film. That's what I was going for. But for some reason, they wanted more and more of that. And we put Kathy created the hero's journey. So your hero's journey is in the big screen. And in the end of these big talks and the screening, they were heroes of looking at themselves and not heroes of going to war. So that really made me happy.
Well, I think for me, it was more that it helped. It was for sexual assault leader trainings within the SART is called sexual assault response training or whatever.
And SHARP. There's
SHARP,
many others, yeah.
So it was training. Really, for me, it was wanting them to rethink that hero's journey model for their work. Like, people like David and Howard Fracken, who we worked with, and 1 in 6, we were partners with. It was their job to, and your work, to fill in the gaps of the psychological trauma and all that. But we added the element of let's not look at these men as victims. Let's bring in that this is really a journey that they take with really good helpers along the way to become who they were meant to be before they were abused, that they return home. So we wanted to, in the military, in this masculine world, where masculinity is a problem, they're seeing a lot of issues, and they're trying to reframe that within the military, that it's important for men to have their voices. We would have the trainers break into groups and rethink the way they've been working with survivors coming back from war. Because what was happening is they were traumatized in war. Their childhood memories are coming back, because of all the trauma. So that was really complex. So sort of breaking apart, how do you, so we did that, and it became just so popular. And so Simon did a lot of those trainings.
It was a little exhausting.
Yeah, it was a lot. Looking back, we probably would have rathered have some of the men in the film, fill in for us. We just weren't thinking a lot, and we hadn't planned. Everything was happening so fast, but that was pretty powerful. And then, just so much was going on. We kind of were becoming a little bit like of experts in the field, and we really had to struggle with, we're not experts, we're filmmakers. And it's the men that are teaching us, what their journey was. And we're just kind of, we're listening in the framework of, we're rooting for you, as, we see you want to heal. We see you've done a lot of healing. So, tell us. So it was, and that, I think that with trauma, you have the experts in trauma. And then like what you're doing, you're looking at metaphor, and how do you reframe this trauma so people can really heal? Because I don't think you can just heal from, I think it has to be, good, solid psychiatric help, men's groups, then societal healing, then recreating a community of people you feel safe with, and reframing masculinity. I mean, it's, in a lot of ways, like what David did with his beautiful Bristlecone project.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous project online. David, in our film, he with his photography work, he has been taking photos of male survivors all throughout the world, and created this database online. I think it's still on 1 in 6. 1 in 6, Steve Laporte was amazing in creating, like, he's another brilliant genius marketer that created a wonderful connections with each other. And he showcased David's work, and it's men's stories with their photos. And so that was a way for men to join together. I'm not alone, from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different kinds of, so I love the way that the healing, journey since we started this has unfolded, to be something like where it's a holding a space in different ways, creatively, psychologically, through film, through podcasts. The people that listen to this, we know that there's men out there still suffering, that they hear, oh my God, I'm not alone. And they get these little nuggets of, oh, wow, that film said this, and this bowl is about, I'm not broken, and I'm going to heal, and I'm okay. And, it's really really amazing. So
And what the military told me was, I kept saying, why aren't you going to have all these therapists? Right? Well, we have all that, but you're here as the lens so that the men can see other men, and then the veil comes down, and then you can walk away, and then they can get help. That's pretty much how it works. Yeah.
Your film is kind of talking at multiple levels in those environments, because males we're either the villains, males, we're the villains because we're the bad guys, or we're the heroes. And actually, most males are in the middle, aren't they? They're called human beings, who can, some days it might be a little bit of a hero, some days it might be a little bit of a villain. Neither days are they really fully on villain or hero. They're just normal human beings trying to cope in a world. But we're not seeing like that. And your film actually broke the taboo 20 years ago by actually explaining that male survivors are all those things in the middle as well. They're just human beings coping with experiences.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's what the men want. The men in the film articulated what a lot of men want, is just to have their feelings, tell the truth, break out of these stereotypes. We did a lot of work in the trainings based on, I think it was male survivors, the myths of being a male survivor. There's like 10 of them or something. We did a lot of work in our trainings around breaking those myths. Even the hero, I'm the hero. Does the hero mean that I won? Well, no, maybe it's a different kind of hero. Maybe it's the hero that you won yourself back.
Heroes kind of, we've stood, most of the survivors I speak to have kind of, even the young ones, they've just not told anybody. I don't think people realize the enormity of being in silence, and that these guys, and women, girls, are holding these secrets, these things that are kind of weighing down, and often carrying the weight of it on their own shoulders as their own responsibility. When they were 6 or 7, it doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter what the context is. If someone abuses you, you're not to blame for it. It's the person who abuses you, but they hold it, don't they? It's kind of deeply embedded that they're somehow responsible for it. So, and the strength it takes to hold that kind of silence is misunderstood, but actually it is a strength. It's just being directed in the wrong way, because they should be doing that. And once they're freed of it, it's a tough old journey. But most of them kind of come out of it better, in a way that they see the world, they grow from it. So they become more kind of connected. Still, you're never going to change history and what was done to you. But I think you can in the right spaces and have the right kind of connections back to reinforcements of, how powerful you are really, and they should be proud of yourself. That's what I tell people. You should be proud of yourself.
Absolutely.
For, even
and having
holding
safe
that.
spaces to break that silence,
And you probably saw it when you were doing it. Guys try.
Families that don't talk about it. Churches now, we're, learning, we're making a new film that we thought we were moving away from that subject, but now we're kind of dealing with another film where the issue of sexual abuse is coming back in the evangelical. It was the Catholic Church that attention was on, and we're learning that the evangelical church is these just massive epidemics of cover-ups and silencing of already silenced, in the religious container, makes it even doubly, harder to break the silence. And then you're traumatized, because you think that the people protecting you are supposed to be godly people. And so, the levels of silencing, and to break out of that is, culturally and religiously. I think about Maya Angelou, who our first film, The Healing Years, was really based, inspired by her because of her story. She was a mute after being sexually abused as a girl for a year. Yeah. And, here she becomes the most incredible voice of women, powerful women in the world through her reclaiming her voice. It's a beautiful thing.
And a powerful advocate for for human beings to be kind of seen and heard, wasn't she? So, and all the stuff, she kind of brought to an energy, a kind of power to things, which I really find really reinforcing. But I like Judith Herman, and I think Herman. I always go back to Herman, and Herman.
Trauma from the gifted child, right?
And Trauma and Recovery is the one I kind of discovered with Judith Herman, where she talked about the unspeakable. Society sees this as the unspeakable. So, I mean, even though it's forced into its your film is part of that process, forcing reality into the denial. But of course, the denial wants to stay in its place of comfort to avoid the reality, and also to avoid, it could be argued, the actual, the level of will it's going to take to reverse. Because this idea that it's unreversible, I think, is a load of rubbish. I think the reality is you can reverse it and you can push back against it. But to do that, you need to do what we don't do, is put the resources into that war rather than wars in the middle of the foreign continent that cost trillions of dollars and pounds and euros. Why not put the trillions into fighting against childhood abuse? And actually, that would change the world. Because if
I
you could
remember
stop
a therapist that I talked to in San Francisco. I didn't interview him for any of the films, but what he said never forgot me. He goes, "You look at societal problems, and most of them go back to child sexual." It was like, God, yes, that's so true. A lot of them. I mean, a bulk. I'm not saying all, but definitely.
One of your American the guy who was involved in Male Survivor, whose name has just slipped my mind for a second, but he's kind of very famous, though I haven't heard of him for a long time. And he was filmed at Male Survivor conference in 2003, in the week of 9/11. And he was filmed, and I always remembered what he said: if you're going to put money into anything that's going to impact everything, this is what you want to put money into, which was sexual violence. Because that will impact everything, because it's already impacting everything. So you need to put the money there. And I thought that was really profound. Yeah. I've never forgotten that.
Let's not hide this story of men and boys. These are our children, being abused. 1 in 6, 1 in 4 girls. Who knows? There might be more. I don't know. But it was sort of like, let's take. You're talking about denial. I'm a truth teller.
Let's take the veil down.
I'm like, I'm not hiding. No darkness could hide here. Let's have the curtain pulled and let's tell this story.
It was about 5 or 6 years of every day, 24/7. It was constant. I don't know how we did it. I really don't. I don't.
It was
intense. And then all of a sudden, Howard Fratkin calls me up and he goes, "You want to go to Penn State? They're bringing Jerry Sandusky to prison."
I remember all that as well.
I can't do this. And outside, all these college students, thousands of them, had their lighters on. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. But we did. And we screened the film over and over and over for 3 days to all the students
with a
major panel discussion. It just and for me, I'm quiet about this because for me, marketing ended. For me, outreach ended. For me, I felt like I became a mystic and not materialistic. And like this outreach manager or whatever that's called, it felt spiritual. I'm going to go deep on this. There was a spiritual feeling. Now I go back to see 400 people, 1,000 people, 1,500 people in front of us. And male survivors at 60, 70, 80, 90 speaking out for the first time. A young boy in Ohio, Howard and I were there, and we were speaking in some place in Ohio. A young boy stood up and he was telling us that he was gang raped just a few months ago. And the whole crowd just hugged him and loved him, and this intense beauty happened. So for me, I don't know, that outreach marketing. I don't know about that. It was more than that.
I think when you enter the world of people who've been basically violated and then you see them being freed, I think it is a spiritual thing. I think it's a human thing. I think it's people being free to be human. And that's a powerful moment when you're in the space with them. I mean, I never lose that kind of shock is the wrong word. It's almost like when someone starts crying and all you've done is do a simple thing that's human, is to validate them and tell them that their existence means something and what was done to them was wrong. And to hear it said in a simple and authentic way, they literally, all the veils, as you described, pull down, I think. And they really realize someone gets it. Someone sees them. Mike Liu's book, I always recommend Mike Liu's book, Victims No Longer, because I think it really gets to the heart of all of that. But, a male survivor should give a call out to male survivor, because I even know what male survivor was before male survivor and Howard Franklin was involved, I think, where it was the National Association of Males in America. And there was nothing else particularly around the world. There's a few bits in Britain. I'm not sure there was much in Europe. There's not much in Europe now, to be honest with you, for males, for lots of reasons, a lot more than there used to be. But, Male Survivor has been out there for, 35 years, and their online chat board is 24 hours a day with moderators and things. And there must be hundreds of thousands of male survivors who found a place of validation, from when there's nowhere else, wherever they are, when they've gone on to that. So they should be that. And 1 in 6, the work that David has done with the Bristol Project is, I think, quite amazing. To take those photographs, does videos as well, and actually to do that. I don't know what he's doing with it at the moment. But, I recommend it for guys to go and watch those videos, because I think film is a very powerful, the narrative that comes from lived experience and hearing it from other male survivors, lots of diversity, kind of tells you that, it's definitely not alone, which is the cliche. So where does it go next? What actually do you do next?
Boys and men, or
filming male survivors, because I always think in Grandy. I don't think I'm a narcissist. I'll have to speak to my therapist. But what I do believe in is big visions, and I actually think film should, the story should be brought forward and kind of bring it up to date and connect it and see how it all works. If you wanted to do it, you may not want to do it because it's a big old kind of mountain to climb, isn't it? But it's kind of, I think that would be an amazing story to actually go look at, and maybe not just males, actually talk about female survivors as well, and allies and things, and the whole story of sexual violence and the humanness of it, which is what we've been talking about. So, that's what I'd love to see.
I mean, there's a lot more, series, not only Netflix, but, in the Christian world, this Shiny Happy People. I don't know if you saw that series about this family, this patriarch guy, Bill Gothard. He was head of this major fundamentalist group, and they just did a whole series. I forget which network it was. Yeah, a lot of networks are doing a lot more. The only thing, we stayed away from the networks like Netflix and all that, because they own it, and then it's shelved.
Yeah, sure.
We wouldn't have been able to do our work that we've done with Netflix. I wish that they would get. I started my career in HBO.
Sure, yeah.
And my work was doing outreach with documentaries, and part of my work, and like taking this film about Vietnam around the country and doing screenings and raising awareness. And I learned a lot about using those projects, those films, to effect change. And I wish that more of the networks would do that, because there's so much that could be done with some of that great programming.
I didn't realize they didn't allow it to be used as an educational resource. So
it might be different now, but back then I understood they own it. If we ever did any work with Netflix or anything like that, we would really have to, put something in a clause that we own the educational rights at least. That's where we did our most work, and that's where that's what we wanted. It may not have been, the showcase for a while, but we consciously, didn't do that, pursue that because we wanted to own it. That's why I did independent films, specifically. So somebody didn't own it, it's just a different beast.
And it's still 20 years later, 5 years later, 8 years later, it's still going on and on and on. With the networks, it ends in 6 months or a year.
Sure, so it's kind of gone, isn't it?
I mean, we still get calls to speak, and after all these years.
Sure,
So I don't know. I'm hoping that they do more with outreach with Netflix and bring filmmakers in to that process.
They get the public reach, don't they? Because you've got that audience, and in fact, you get 10 million views of the film.
Yes.
That's very difficult to do as an independent film, isn't it? Because you can't market it to that number of people. They've got the platform to do that. But if the price is that it really is kind of this week's offer, and then next week we're moving on to next week's offer, and we just shelf it, and you can find it in the archive, but you can't use it outside for educational means. Exactly. That's a limitation, isn't it? And actually, I think that's a limitation on Netflix. So Netflix should allow that to be used in some form as education.
Yeah, it's a dilemma for filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers. And what's happening now, you're getting like the Obamas making series, and Prince. Whatever.
Meghan and Prince Harry.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle,
and they're getting paid a lot of money.
And then all of us filmmakers, the independents.
We get nothing.
Sure, it's not right.
It's just frustrating. And there are independents that, really do well and all that. But then there's some amazing independent filmmakers out there that they don't get their work shown because the network's going to own it, and I don't know.
But one of the interesting things would be is, a film festival where we brought the film to the UK and actually put it in a real theatre, and sort of like then bring you guys here and do. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but we'll see whether it's possible. If it was possible, and actually put you on a stage and do the film, show the film, and then have an audience with the producers and directors. And then bring some male survivors in as well to kind of talk about life as a male survivor. Cool. So, we did the film festival in November, didn't we? And we did it online. It'd be great to do it offline as a fringe festival. There is a big festival runs in Leeds called the Leeds Film Festival, which is internationally known. And it'd be great to have a strand that was kind of, on the fringe. Not sure we could do it for this November, but it would be really good to kind of think about it. To bring the story up to date and actually bring you to the UK so audience could actually speak and talk to the director and to the producers and things directly. That would be really good. But is there anything you would like to ask the guys about the film documentary futures and things, Steve?
I think just the film obviously had so much impact at the time, and you've spoken about all of the momentum that it gained. Do you think that if a film came out the film came out now, do you think it would have the same message? Do you think it would have the same momentum? Do you feel there's been a shift maybe in the past 20 years, or do you think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done around kind of like breaking the silence and the stigma?
Well, I'm going to answer it on my end. There's over 8 billion people in the world. And I think this message has been heard by maybe 100 million. And there's 8 billion. That's my answer.
Yeah.
And I have definitely seen, I don't know in the kind of audience that we've had, if it would have such a big impact, because we have come a long way, I think. And I agree that with Simon and Bob, that there's these cultures that don't, know that much about this, or there's no room for them to talk about it. There's young boys growing up that are still being sexually abused, so in that way, trying to find the communities that are dealing still with the Boy Scouts issue is bringing that to awareness, right? But there are communities still that are not reached. I even,
Absolutely.
in this new film we're doing that we touch on the issue of in the evangelical church, it's a lot of women that are coming out, talking about it. And some men are, but I see it in that, in the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant organization in the United States, right? They're
18
like
million.
the Catholic Church. They have a huge abuse epidemic thing going on, and cover-ups. It's all over the news here. And there's some men that are speaking out, but I get the sense that most people in that world don't know as much about the sexual abuse of boys. That's huge. And so there's those kind of communities. I feel like, teachers need to be educated about this, that or in school, because you look in the classroom, those kids are there all day long. There's 1 in 6 boys in that school, in that classroom. Things like that. So when you start breaking it down into micro communities, I think Simon's right. There's a lot, but to our network of the section, we touched on certain audiences and groups that they're a lot more aware now. So it wouldn't have an impact there, but it might in other places. But we haven't really even gone there, and that's
in different languages.
Yeah.
And remember, the Latin American culture is very, very large. But the 2 largest populations right now in the world are Asian and Black.
Sure, yeah.
And that they haven't heard the word.
Sure,
and
yeah.
we're talking, if there's 8 billion, I'm talking about 5 billion is Black and Asian. So, and they haven't heard the word.
Yeah. And a lot of things, one thing that comes up, like Tony was also abused by his cousin, and he didn't talk so much about that in the film because it was a perpetrator that, in a park that he was abused by. And I want to use the word rape. He was raped by. But his cousin also, so I think there's still not like the family, systems. There's a lot of that going on where there's a lot of hush, hush, hush. A lot. We hear it. We heard it all over in our research. So, the family system reaching that's not just the crisis centers working it, but the families. I don't know how to do that, but that I think is a really important network and to reach and the teachers and of course anywhere you go, as we know with the Boy Scouts and churches, there's no place. I think if I were a parent now, I would never let my kids stay over anybody's house or never let them go on a camping trip. With the church, or because you just don't know. I hate to say that, it's sort of a paranoid thing. Yes, you can empower your kid to have those voices and all, but as a parent, I don't know, there's just no really knowing. And how do you, I think empowering your child is a really important thing. Educating and having tools for that. It's an interesting thing.
It's where the word complexity comes from, doesn't it? It's why the people who run the system run away from it. Because when they start to look at the complexities of dealing with it, they say, oh my, and they run, because it means massive shifts in all sorts of areas to change. I think they should do that. Yeah. I think they should have the political will and moral courage to do it. And I think they are shifting towards it. There's something happening later this year in Colombia, where there's a big international global conference looking at childhood sexual abuse. And they're bringing lots of survivors into it. And there's the World Health Organization, it's the UN, it's all of these, and it's a big conversation, which looks really interesting. So and there's been something in Europe recently. So, we know change is happening, especially as they become more trauma-informed about things, because they realize, even if you could just put it down to dollars, If you actually invest, you'll save money. If you do trauma, if you leave it alone, it's cost you a fortune in all sorts of other areas. So even if it's just down to pure down to capitalist money things, then actually, you're talking, it's worth investing in to stop it. So all of those stuff. So I think, and your film is part of the history of that change.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's why it's part of the history of that change. And it's really I think, a pivotal part of the history of the change for male survivors, because it's one of those, it just stands out there amongst films. There's not many films about male survivors, and yours just stands out there. So I'm really, really pleased that you agreed to speak to us this evening for us.
Yeah.
It's morning for you guys, but it's kind of really, really nice to chat.
Yeah.
So, the world's changed a lot in 20 years. So, I have to be honest as well, it is in the UK then, 20 years ago, there were few services really, even for women survivors, female survivors. Now it's much different. The problem is the more you build for people to build it and they shall come, but the more you build, the more are coming. So you need to build more. So it's the figures are real. Who knows what the real prevalence is? But all we know is the more you open the door, the more you tell people there are safe spaces to come, the more that are coming. So, that's the issue, is meeting the demand. So, the things are changing. But your film, I think, is genuinely a pivotal moment in male survivor narrative kind of story and change. And it sits there, in that space of pioneering that conversation in a way that hadn't been seen before. So I'm really, really pleased that we're able to speak about it, and that I'm still able to continue to show it and to kind of use it to help.
I'm so grateful.
People.
You really putting it all in perspective from here, through the years. It's really meaningful being here talking to you and hearing your perspective on. We lose that perspective. So thank you. It really means a lot. You've always been an incredible ally, and I think you were the first that brought it to Europe, which was really exciting for us, and that opened up doors to other avenues throughout the world. And we remember being really moved by that.
I don't think it dates. I think your film stands the test of time. And I think, it'd be great to bring it up. It's great that we've been able to bring some of it up to date so people know what happened to some of the people who were in it, because I think people would ask that question. And it's good.
I thought about bringing the, we have a lot of footage that we didn't edit in. I dream about those kind of things, but it's like, the prison footage, or everything, all of it, the group, the behind the scenes, and there's so much we could read.
I mean, I wouldn't want to add any work to your schedule and stuff. But thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation and to chat to you about your film, because I am a fan's an interesting word, isn't it? But I really, really think your film is just so. I've seen audiences who really get male survivors after watching it, because it just brings the reality of their existence, but also the possibilities of their existence as well. So thank you very much.
So touching. Thank you. It really, really means so much. It was a lot of work, and to hear that makes it all great. Thank you.